The ocean was calm. The sun rose over the Pacific. It was December 7, 1941. The island of Oahu shimmered in the early morning light. Sailors on the decks of American battleships yawned and stretched. Sunday mornings were supposed to be peaceful. Then the sky roared. Dark specks appeared over the horizon. First they looked like birds. Then engines screamed. Dozens of Japanese warplanes sliced through the blue sky. The world changed in seconds. Sirens wailed. Bombs fell. The first explosion tore through the USS Arizona. Fire erupted from its heart. Steel twisted. Men screamed. Oil burned across the water, turning the sea black. In less than 2 hours, the pride of the U.S. Pacific Fleet lay in ruins. 8 battleships destroyed or damaged. Hundreds of aircraft shattered. More than 2,000 Americans killed. Pearl Harbor was not just an attack. It was a message. Japan had awakened the United States. A sleeping giant stirred. Across the ocean, in Washington, President Franklin D. Roosevelt sat silent. Then he spoke the words that echoed across history. A date which will live in infamy. The next day, America declared war on Japan. The Pacific was now a battlefield. The Japanese Empire stretched far and wide. They had conquered Manchuria. They had marched through China. They had taken the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore. Their navy was unmatched, their pilots elite. The rising sun flag fluttered over the Pacific Islands. They believed no one could stop them. But America began to rise. Factories that once built cars now forged tanks and aircraft. Women took over the assembly lines. Men lined up to enlist. The nation turned into a war machine. Admiral Chester Nimitz took command of the Pacific Fleet. He studied the maps. He saw the vast blue ocean as both enemy and opportunity. Every island, every reef, every stretch of water mattered. He knew Japan had the momentum, but momentum could shift. In early 1942, the Pacific was a Japanese lake. They controlled it with power and precision. Their aircraft carriers were mobile fortresses. Their Zero fighters ruled the skies. The Americans needed a plan. Something bold. Something unexpected. That plan was Doolittle. April 1942. 16 B-25 bombers stood ready on the deck of the USS Hornet. The mission was dangerous. They were to strike Tokyo itself. The idea seemed impossible. But it wasn't about damage. It was about message. The planes took off from the carrier in rough seas. They flew low across the ocean, radar silent. Hours later, explosions echoed over Tokyo. It was not a military victory, but it was a psychological one. For the first time, Japan knew that America could strike back. For the first time, fear entered their empire. Back in the Pacific, the next test awaited the Coral Sea. May 1942. 2 great fleets searched for each other in the vast emptiness of the Pacific. The Battle of the Coral Sea was the first naval battle fought entirely by aircraft. The ships never saw each other. Bombers and fighters did the killing. Both sides claimed victory. But for Japan, one carrier was lost, another damaged. For America, it was costly yet hopeful. The tide was shifting. Then came Midway. June 1942. Japan planned a massive strike to destroy what remained of the U.S. fleet. They wanted to lure American carriers into a trap. But the Americans had broken Japan's naval code. They knew the plan. They knew the time. They knew the place. At dawn on June 4th, Japanese bombers attacked Midway Island. American fighters scrambled. The sky filled with smoke, fire, and chaos. Then came the American dive bombers. They dove almost vertically from the clouds. At 10:22 a.m., the course of the war changed forever. In just 5 minutes, 3 Japanese aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, were engulfed in flames. A 4th, Hiryu, followed later that day. The might of Japan's carrier force was shattered. For carriers gone, hundreds of planes lost, irreplaceable pilots dead. The Battle of Midway was not just a victory. It was revenge for Pearl Harbor. It was the turning point. Nimitz stood on the deck of his flagship and looked across the endless ocean. He knew the war was far from over. But he also knew something powerful: the Japanese advance had been stopped. From now on, America would be the hunter. Across the Pacific, men trained for island warfare. Marines learned to fight jungle, coral, and fire. They practiced beach landings. They studied tides. They prepared to invade places no one had ever heard of. The strategy was simple. Island hopping. Take one island. Build an airbase. Move closer to Japan. Repeat. Each island a stepping stone across the sea. The next name on the list was Guadalcanal. The heat was suffocating. Mosquitoes swarmed. The jungle smelled of death. In August 1942, the U.S. Marines landed on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. It was the first major offensive against Japan. First, the landing was easy. Then came the night. Japanese troops counterattacked with brutal ferocity. They screamed as they charged. Bayonets flashed. Grenades exploded in the dark. The jungle echoed with chaos. The battle raged for 6 months. Men fought not just the enemy, but disease, hunger, and fear. The Japanese called it the Island of Death. The Americans called it hell. But by February 1943, the U.S. flag flew over Guadalcanal. It was the first major Japanese defeat on land. That victory sent a message across the ocean. The tide had turned. Japan was no longer invincible. But the cost was heavy. Thousands dead. Thousands more wounded or missing. The Pacific was claiming lives as fast as it took ground. In Tokyo, the Japanese High Command realized the danger. The empire was vast, but their supply lines were stretched thin. They had lost too many planes, too many ships, too many men. America, on the other hand, was producing more of everything: planes, ships, bullets, hope. The war was now about endurance. Who could last longer? Who could bleed more? Who could burn brighter before going dark? The jungle of Guadalcanal never slept. At night, the cries of the wounded mixed with the hum of insects. The darkness was thick, almost alive. Marines clutched their rifles and waited. Some whispered prayers. Some stared into the black, their minds half gone. Then came the sound. A faint whistle, then a scream. Mortar fire. Another night in hell. Days passed like years. The Japanese launched wave after wave of counterattacks. They fought with courage, even madness. They charged into machine gun fire, refusing to surrender. The Americans held their ground inch by inch. Each palm tree, each riverbank, each ridge became a battlefield. Men died for patches of mud. The rain never stopped. Boots rotted. Bodies swelled. The smell of death hung over the island. But through that storm, the American spirit hardened. They learned what it meant to fight to the last man. They learned what it meant to survive. By early 1943, the Japanese began to withdraw. They slipped away in the dark, leaving behind the dead and the broken. When the sun rose, the Marines stood silent among the ruins. Guadalcanal was theirs. It was the first step toward Japan. After Guadalcanal, the Pacific strategy became clear. Island hopping. Take one island, use it to reach the next. Each step closer to Tokyo. Each battle bloodier than the last. The next target was Tarawa, a small atoll in the Gilbert Islands, just 2 miles long, flat, surrounded by reefs, defended by thousands of Japanese soldiers dug deep in bunkers and tunnels. They believed no one could take it. November 20th, 1943. The American fleet opened fire. Battleships thundered. Shells crashed onto the beaches. The earth trembled. For hours, the island disappeared in smoke. Then came the order. Marines, go ashore. The tide was wrong. The landing craft got stuck on coral reefs. Marines had to jump into the water, chest deep, and wade through hundreds of yards under enemy fire. Machine guns tore through the waves. Bodies floated. Boats burned. Blood turned the sea red. But the Marines kept going. They crawled, they bled, they fought their way to the beach. By nightfall, only a few hundred men had made it ashore alive. Still, they dug in. Still, they fought. For 3 days, the battle raged. Flamethrowers burned the bunkers. Grenades cleared the trenches. Hand-to-hand combat filled the air with screams and smoke. When it was over, nearly every Japanese defender was dead.